It's our first time doing something like this. Sworne's here, Tundra's here. So both Sworne and Tundra have agreed to have a debate or a discussion with certain rules, and so I'll let them do most of the talking. But they agreed to talk about subjective versus objective truth, and so each person will take 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and then each person will take 5 minutes to introduce their initial argument. And so, Sworne, are you ready to start with
Yep.
your introduction to who you are?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go from my introduction right into my initial argument. Is that correct?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, everybody. My name is Sworne. I have been a part of the Levels chat for just shy of 6 months, having left for 2 months during a period of increased demand as the school year wrapped up. When summer began and HM declared his singleness, I came back to shoot my shot in the introductions. I like him for his clarity of information and position on the current state of the dating market, as well as various other degenerating factions in our nation. More broadly, I am most drawn to the explanation of reality's entirety and conveying that to mankind for the overall benefit. I believe life is purposeful, and the why is God. Many here know that I am a born again Christian from the topic discussion, Christ is Truth, which currently has above 6,000 comments and continues to generate traffic as more people pour into Levels looking for the same answers I once asked for. Having been raised with purposeless atheism, I almost killed myself at 21, and since I didn't, I treated every subsequent day as an extra day, striving to find for the deep answers. In my quest for truth, I met Jesus, who I accepted as Lord at 23 and haven't looked back since. Though I am a Christian, throughout the debate, I will be keeping my explanation for objectivity, absent of divinity, though as a Christian, I believe objectivity is evidence for divinity. That is not my focus for the debate tonight. I am currently an ELA teacher, which stands for
20
English
seconds.
Language Arts. I teach secondary education, which is at a high school level. Within my English courses, I do have a unit on both political rhetoric and logical argumentation. Nonetheless, I am not a professional, and this debate will be sadly informal and full of errors, if not from my opponent, then from myself. This is my first debate, and I look very much forward to the results and its effects shared between Tundra, myself, and the audience.
All right, so now, Tundra, are you ready for your introduction to who you are?
Yep.
All right.
Howdy, I am Tundra. I've been here in the Levels community for about 2-3 months now. I saw the Levels video and I was quite drawn to it, and I've been here ever since as an active member. I love this community. I don't really know else what to say besides I'm here to argue about the subjectivity of truth. It is my stance that objective truth may theoretically exist. However, due to the inherently subjective nature of human consciousness and the continuously evolving understanding of knowledge through scientific progress, we cannot obtain objective truth with certainty. This is why, in my view, truth is largely subjective. And then I think that there's an important distinction on how we define these terms and how we use them colloquially and what these terms mean on a deeper philosophical level that I would like to investigate. And I'm excited to talk with Sworne and have a nice, meaningful discussion about this topic. That's all for my introduction.
Okay. Okay, and then before I go on further into Sworne beginning her introduction to her arguments, I wanted to first gain consent of recording and posting this from you two. And you guys have agreed before, but I want to make sure you guys say it on record.
I agree.
You both
I have no issues.
So Tundra, yes, and Sworne, yes? Okay.
Yes.
So getting back to it, let me reset the clock for 5 minutes, and then Sworne will be going when I let her know she is ready to go. And she can start whenever she's ready.
Okay. Before I begin my argument, for the sake of clarification, I'd like to define the following. Free agents. Free agents are persons who have purpose, will, and freedom to express their individuality in reality, choosing either to do good or bad. Subjects. Subjects are free agents in a given argument. Subjects are to the argument as litigants are to a judicial action. And lastly, the third witness. The third witness is a name for the objective truth which is present regardless of the will of a free agent. So first, I affirm that the truth is objective, and that proof of truth's objectivity resides in its absolute and constant qualities. Truth is and is apart from the subjective nature or will of a limited free agent. The sufficiency of this fact today is independent of my or anyone's awareness or note of it. If I were not here to debate the position of objective truth, the position of objective truth would yet be present. It is not required to be acted upon in order to be. This is opposed to subjectivity, which suggests that in order for something to be, it must be acted upon. Our subjective wills are subordinate to a reality within this world which consists of free agents who generate expression through a series of externalization. Another word for externalization is idea. Examples of externalization are as follows: scientific and judicial laws, theories, novels, published research, and so on, all of which operate out of a medium called language. It is true that free agents impart their ideas into objective reality through externalization. If reality wasn't constant, there could be no externalization, since there would be no reality to act in. Since reality consists of time, matter, and space, externalization must, by acting, come to be. Therefore, if reality was subjective, we wouldn't know it because there wouldn't be a constant medium to display expression. It would be like painting the air. Nothing could be seen nor understood because of the absence of the third witness which gives form to the subjective expression. In order for me to make a valid argument here today, there must be a standard, a third witness, to which my argument must be measured or found to be justifiable. My argument for objective truth rests on two propositions as follows. Proposition number 1. Objective truth is proven by its sophistication. There is a third and a greater witness, which is not a subject, whenever one or more free agents are acting an event. The third witness alone testifies to the specificity and complexity of a given event. It, the third witness, is absolute and definitive. This premise points to the insurmountable complexity of reality, which we grow to understand each day, specifically in the field of science, say microbiology, and how subjects, regardless of their sophistication, will, and historically have, fallen short of conquering truth and the exactness of the third witness. How much time do I have?
1 minute, 40 seconds.
Okay, thank you. My second premise is objective truth is proven by its constancy. If a free agent is in conflict with the third witness at any given time in all of human record, then it is the free agent which is lesser and in error. And the gravity of that error is weighed against the certitude of the third witness. The second premise points to a common idiom: to learn from the mistakes of others. There are errors when free agents act, and the measure of those errors are weighed against the constancy of the third witness. For example, 2 plus 2 50 years ago was 4, is 4 now, and will be 4 in another 20 years. The
1 minute
constancy
left.
of life is objectively and universally preferred above all other answers. This also explains the phenomenon of repeatability and duplication. According to the scientific method, the study of or process of the discovery of what is the truth of any object, the study must be tested before its conclusion. That means the object of observation must retain qualities which are resistant to change across time in order to render findings which can be called valid or
20
true.
seconds.
So with those two premises, it is valid to draw the conclusion that given truth is both sophisticated and constant, it must necessarily be objective.
All right. So now I'm going to set 5 minutes for Tundra for him to build his case for 5 minutes. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
So my argument for subjectivity, I approach the notion of objective, subjective, and truth in a slightly different way. I would define truth as in accordance with reality, and I would define there's two definitions we can kind of go with objective. And we can define objective as mind independent, or we can talk about the invariable nature of truth between minds. I would say that the very nature of consciousness is the subjective perceiver in this reality. We think as, in a normal sense, we operate in the world thinking that our eyes are windows into the objective world outside of us. However, that is not the case. In reality, our brain works to communicate with our sensory organs, and you construct reality within the mind. All of your interaction from the start of your life to the end of your life, you are not interacting with an objective reality. You are instead interacting with an abstraction, a movie made within the mind. You are not gazing upon the objective substrate that exists beyond you. You are merely gazing upon a construction within the mind. We cannot escape the subjective nature as humans. We can talk to other humans and discuss reality and find things that we call true. But I would say that these truths that we find, I would say, are far from objective. That, in fact, everything is quite subjective. We can never escape the prison of subjectivity. We can't even prove other people are conscious agents. The mind is an intangible factor, and we are seemingly ghosts operating within this abstraction of reality that exists. And then I think that truth is a very elusive concept in this sense. I think that due to the subjective framework and how we evolve psychologically, truth is not actually so constant. It is a quite changing thing that as we develop and our perspectives shift, as new information is provided, we discard what we call truth for a better refined truth. But the truth that we discarded before, we were very quick to call that truth objective. What has changed? Based upon new information, based upon the evolving nature of our perceptions, our flawed perceptions that are an abstraction, we then call this next thing absolute or objective truth. But we were so certain to call the truth before objective truth. I would argue that we cannot have access to this objective substrate of reality. We can't have access to this objective truth. That this third witness, this universal, is by very nature out of reach for the subjectivity of humans. And it is very far from constant. How much time do I have?
1 minute 30.
The nature of mathematics and science seems objective. It is rigorously tested, and then we colloquially refer to these things as objective. However, we do not have any certainty of this nature of truth. We have refined these concepts to such a way that we can transfer them between humans.
1 minute.
And then we call these concepts objective. However, at the end of the day, we are still working with subjective truths. They're just so refined in a way that we feel confident to call them objective. But we cannot escape the subjectivity of the perceiver. We cannot escape the subjectivity of perception. We cannot escape the transferability between minds. And all truth is very far from constant. And we like to cling to this notion of certainty and label something as objective. But I would say that clinging to this certainty is a false assumption and a bold
20
claim.
seconds.
I think it's very bold to say that something is objectively true, that exists independent of us due to the very subjective nature of consciousness. And that is all.
Good. You have 5 seconds left. Good. Okay, so now it seems like they're going to be having 10 minutes each to go back and forth. I was thinking the best way to do this is to have each person have a 10-minute time bank, and so each time they are talking, they're using their time bank. Does that seem fair?
Sure.
Yeah, that seems fair. Who's going to keep track of the time?
Okay, let me put 2 10-minute banks, and then I'll set them. And then so I'll let Sworne go first, and whenever she's done talking, I'll just pause it and then go to Tundra.
Okay. So
go
are
ahead.
we asking each other questions, or are we providing a...
Yeah, you
So
just try to rebut his conversation or try to support your case more.
I think we should collaborate a
Okay.
little bit on definitions, because it seems like you and I kind of approach this from a slightly different way. And if we don't kind of build this foundational definition, we're going to be circling back to it later on.
Which definition would you like to clarify?
What is your notion of objectivity? And how do you think we have access to it?
Yeah, so objective truth is truth that is independent of the observer. What was your second part?
Well, my second question is, how would we have access to it? How do we
By
have
reason-
access to this truth independent of the observer?
Right, that's a good question. I think that the third witness answers that in that it's reality. And so if you like if we're in a painting, right? And I am blue and you are green, the only way that we can be expressed on the canvas is by being acted on the canvas. So, since we're free agents and we have the capacity to act and express ourselves, we can see the green and we can see the blue because of the canvas. And so I'm saying objective truth is that canvas. And without that canvas, expression of individuality is impossible.
So my contention would be, in my eyes, due to the subjective nature of consciousness itself, the fact that we're not peering into this objective reality that exists outside of us, our eyeballs are not windows into the outside world, but rather they are a tool that the brain uses to construct a mental image of reality within the mind that is inaccessible to anyone but yourself. I think that trying to grab onto this notion of this objective substrate of reality or truth that exists independent of the perceiver is a bold claim, because I think that through the tools that we have, we can refine this abstraction of the underlying reality, but we can never hope to reach it.
Can you define refining abstraction?
So, refining abstraction. So, I would say what I mean by abstraction is how we perceive the world within the mind. That the mind is a subjective prison through which we view the world. And because we cannot exit the mind, we cannot exit the mind and gaze upon the substrate of this like third witness. We cannot interact with it directly. We are indirectly interacting with it, and that's the very subjective nature of it. And so when we're talking about refinement, I think that we're using tools constructed by science and mathematics to try to understand this objective nature on a deeper level. However, this is a very elusive concept that science shifts. It is not the absolute arbiter of truth, but rather it kind of tries to explain our knowledge, and that this shifting is far from constant. And that I think it is a bold claim to call what we know objective due to this perception reality barrier, due to the changing nature of knowledge. I think that saying that we have objective truth, while theoretically possible, I don't think we can know for certainty. I think that all we can touch is an abstraction. within the mind.
Okay, so that's an interesting take on the use refinement, because typically refinement indicates a more perfect quality. So in your description of refining abstraction, that sounds like discovery, which may be the process of science, which I was talking about, where if something is repeatable, it is that way because it is objectively true. And the only abstraction, I don't disagree that abstraction isn't present within the subject, but I believe that that's the only place it's present. I believe that reality is objective and that there is a reality outside of the subject which is unchanging. I do not deny that there is subjective claims such as this is the most delicious almond I've ever tasted. However, the way that we're able to differentiate between a subjective claim and an objective claim is by weighing its measure against the nature which you're measuring it by. So the person who says this is the tastiest almond are making a subjective claim according to their own experience and how many almonds they've had in their life. But the person that says 2 plus 2 is 4 is making an external observation of a constancy in a reality which is separate and true from the observer. So I want to ask you a question. If subjective truth is reality, how would we know?
That is quite a good question. So I'm basing my assumption here. I tried to make as few assumptions as possible, but the one assumption I can make is that I am having a conscious experience. And I think by the very nature of how our consciousness interacts with the world, that I think it's a fair assumption to make about the subjectivity of it. And I would agree with you that, yes, an objective reality exists, and theoretically objective truths exist. My main contention is if the subjective nature of consciousness as humans, can we obtain these truths? I'm not so sure. And you bring up mathematics, and I think that's a fair point. I think mathematics is quite possibly the closest frontier to revealing objective truth. But mathematics is based on subjective axioms. These are assumptions we make, and we can construct a logically consistent mathematical system. But these subjective axioms are human constructions. And there are different mathematical systems with different axioms that provide different answers to how we want to approach problems. So I think that while math is the strongest argument and is seemingly objective, I think just like with science, due to the evolving nature and how we refine our understanding over time, that calling it objective truth is a very bold assumption. When we say objective truth, I think we take these words for granted. I think in a philosophical way, both these terms are describing very grand concepts. And when we put objective and truth side by side, wow, that is a very powerful concept. And I think due to the subjective nature, claiming that we have obtained objective truth, I'm not so certain about it.
Yeah, so the
hold on,
debate
I
topic
wanted to
today.
remind each person of how much time they have left in their bank. So Sworne has 7 minutes and 9 seconds. Tundra has 4 minutes and 31 seconds.
Thank you. So the debate today is truth objective or subjective? So my position is that truth is objective, meaning regardless of definitions, truth is independent of the observer, meaning that its constancy is a testament to its objectivity. So the fact that 2 plus 2, you brought up mathematics, because I did, is always going to be 4 is a testament to the supremacy of objective truth. And it's a very small example. So you say I don't believe that we could ever reach objective truth, and I agree. That is actually one of my premises, which states that because of truth's sophistication and the limitation of subjects, truth by its nature is objective. So let me actually, since I have the time, I do have an example of this, which sort of showcases the sophistication of objectivity. Imagine a shed which 2 brothers set out to destroy by fire. Brother A goes to one end and brother B to the opposite end. They count to 3 and light their match, laying it where they choose immediately afterwards. Soon the entire shed is ablaze, and they stand back and ponder whose fire was most destructive. Brother B claims to have had the better consuming power due to the wind which blew westward as he set his match from the east side of the shed. Brother A insists that the compact logs which were consumed by his fire were weightier and the foundation, and therefore a larger majority of the shed. Now, question 1. At what point does the fire from Brother B join unto the fire of Brother A and become one destructive element? And the second question, which of the 2 fires consume the most before becoming one destructive element? Now, we could give all these brothers all the tools they should require finding out the answer to these 2 questions, but all the sophistication of technology in the world would not be able to answer either of these to the precision of truth. The blending of the fire would have to be observed at multiple points at the molecular level when the 2 elements meet. Moreover, the age or quality or weight of the wood would have to be considered in order to account for the exact amount destroyed. Ash, additionally, that was blown away, would have to be weighed. This is an example of an externalization which cannot be witnessed as truth by the subject, but nonetheless is answerable by the third witness. Objective truth has the answer to both of those questions because its nature is unlimited on understanding and scope of capacity. Every question, not just the 2 above, but the why, what, how, when, where, can only be sufficiently answered by objective truth. So I have a follow-up question to that.
Mhm.
Where does your subjective reality end and another's begin?
That is a really good question. I would say that I don't think you can even have proof that another's subjective reality exists. I think that due to the very nature of the prison of mind, I can never interact with your mind. I can never raw transfer and have presence within your mind to even know that you exist. For all I know, only I exist. So it seems like we can use like these proxy variables, like I'm a human, you're a human. The way we interact, it is very obvious to me that there is something behind those eyes. There is a consciousness. However, I cannot touch it. So I would say, where does my subjective reality end? That's a good question. I would say, I'm not sure if we can escape it. And earlier you said that you think truth is objective, but it seemed like you agreed that we can't really interact with it. Was that what you said? I don't want to strawman you.
No, I believe we can interact with objective reality. It's the canvas that we are acting in.
So I would agree that theoretically objective truth exists. I would agree that theoretically objective reality exists. I would largely disagree with our interaction of it. I think my highlight of the perception reality bearing with consciousness shows our limited interaction. That our interaction is nothing but an abstraction upon reality. It is not the underlying substrate itself. And that to call this refined abstraction objective truth, I think is a bold claim. And I
Okay,
think.
so
Go ahead.
Um, okay, so you're saying that there's no proof of another subject reality and that you cannot interact with another person's subjective reality, and so then you cannot say whether or not your subjective reality is all encompassing or limited. Is that correct?
What was the last part? That I can't say it's encompassing or what?
Well, let me just pose it as a question. Is your subjective reality all encompassing, meaning it embraces all of reality? Or is your subjective reality limited, meaning when you interact with another person, you're interacting with another subjective reality?
So I would say that the subjective reality we perceive within the mind is not all encompassing of reality. That is the very subjectiveness of consciousness. And then what was the second question of like if I'm interacting with another person, am I interacting with another subjective reality?
Yeah, do you believe in a limited subjective reality or do you believe in an all encompassing, all power subjective reality?
I'll try my best to answer, but my
I
view.
was going to pause real quick to say that Sworne has 3 minutes and 18 seconds. Tundra has 1 minute and 52 seconds.
So my view is that all of the reality I interact with is subjective to my conscious experience. And that other
Okay, so
people
then it's
exist
all
within my.
encompassing.
I would say it's all encompassing. I wouldn't say all encompassing. I would like to make a slight distinction. I wouldn't say it's all encompassing of my reality. It's all encompassing of my subjective reality. It is not all encompassing of the theoretical reality that exists. And it's this intangibility that we cannot touch as subjective perceivers. We are this awareness that is
Mm-hmm.
dealing with an abstraction, and other
So,
people are part of that abstraction.
so then, yes or no, do you believe in a reality that is greater than the subject?
Yes, I believe it exists. I do not think we can gaze upon its objectivity.
Okay, thank you for answering that. How much time do we have?
So I paused both people's. Sworne has 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Tundra has 59 seconds.
Okay, so I'm going to go into a little expository since I have the time. So I want to talk real quick. I want to touch on co-subjectivity because I know that's another argument that's sort of closely tied to Tundra's. Co-subjectivity. Um, so it is also true that subjects, subjective externalizations are graded on a scale of appealing to profane by the receptive community of free agents. That is not the limit of validity, for a group of free agents have in the past proven a consensus to be profane or inadequate to the sophistication of the third witness when weighed against time. So I'm speaking about the constancy and the proof of objective truth that way. An example would be the Aryan race in Nazi Germany, with a population who agreed and supported Hitler enough to allow genocide. Now, this is not a moral argument. I am simply stating that throughout time, it is true that life is to be preferred above death. Though they were co-subjective in their acknowledgement of reality, time has proven the entire group, which made that consensus, to be in error. And there are many examples like this today. So I have one last question. Um, uh, and maybe not the last one. I have some more, but Tundra, how does a free agent distinguish between a hallucination, a dream, a reality, and a lie?
You can't. That's the very nature of consciousness and its subjectivity. That we are only interacting with the mind. You have no way of knowing that reality exists outside of you. And I would like to talk about this sophistication and certainty you talk about. And we have paradigm shifts in science all the time. In when back when we were dealing with the paradigm of Newtonian physics, we would have said that, based upon our understanding of science and physics, we have
20,
done
20
rigorous
seconds,
testing
Tundra. 20
and we
seconds.
call this objective. But then Einstein came around with his theory of relativity. and it threw things out the window. It changed our understanding. And now there's a huge can of worms with quantum mechanics that I
You're
don't
almost out of
think
time.
we
You're
could
out of
call
time.
this objective due to the
You're out of
changing
time.
nature. It's far from certain.
All right.
So go ahead,
you,
Sworne.
Tundra.
Sworne, you have 1 minute and 45 seconds left on your bank.
Okay. Okay, so that's really interesting that you're saying that you cannot, as a subjective person, distinguish between a hallucination, a dream, a reality, or a lie. So then, in your subjective worldview, and I know I can't ask a question, so I don't want to be unfair in my presentation of this, but the Nazis would have been correct, or if we want to just remove morality entirely out of this, we can do that too. You would say that when you're sleeping, you're alive and awake because you cannot tell the difference between a reality, like your interaction with reality, and your interaction with your dream, which is by definition your mind. And so I think that's really interesting that you're not distinguishing between those two realities, and your claim to subjective truth demands that of you. So I want to thank you for your transparency and how you answered that. Let's see. So how much time do I have? I have more. I just don't waste time.
You have around 20 seconds. 26
Okay, 20
seconds.
seconds. Here we go. Okay. So Robert Davis, a Canadian novelist, famously said, "The eye sees only what the mind is prepared to comprehend." This idea that man is limited in his very scope of perception is qualified by research psychologist Martin Rolfe, who studies the role of rapid eye movement in visual perception. His findings with other colleagues show that man picks his focus. An example of this phenomenon is in technology, which utilizes the target responses of the mind's focus, like a VR headset or the new Apple update, iOS 18. Okay.
All right, so now we're going to the next section of this debate where each person will have 5 minutes to give their final thoughts. And I expect them to bring up no new points, only giving only just bringing up what they've already discussed. They can't bring up any new thing because that is not fair to the person after they finish talking. The other person can't respond. So I'm going to begin. Who wants to go first for their final thoughts?
I can go
ahead.
first and give Sworne the final say.
Okay.
Okay.
Again, I'm
So-
reminding everything that's discussed in the final thoughts must have been already discussed in the original arguments. Anyway, go ahead
So-
whenever you're ready.
We can approach the notion of objective truth from two different angles. We could talk about objectivity from a mind-independent angle, and I think by showing the subjective nature of consciousness and how reality is constructed within the mind, we are not peering into an objective reality through our eyes. Everything is constructed by your consciousness. I think that if we approach objectivity from this mind-independent notion, that I've shown that it is completely subjective. There's no way to know of the objective substrate of reality. If we approach objectivity from this angle of it is invariance between minds, that we've changed the definition so that we're talking about what we kind of co-subjectively sign on to. I still want to cast doubt upon this sophistication and certainty. There are scientific paradigm shifts that completely upend what we thought we knew. Science is a huge can of worms that is evolving. It is not the absolute arbiter of truth, but rather it is a process of refinement. And since it is a process of refinement, I think it's a bold claim at any slice of time to claim we have objective truth. I think that in addition to that, how I discussed earlier about the subjective frameworks constructed by the mind. Through our experiences, we have a view on the world that is private only to you. You can never escape your subjective prison. You cannot gaze upon the objective substrate of reality. That everything is built upon this subjectivity. What we claim to be objective truth is inescapable from these subjective foundations. we have to make a lot of assumptions about reality. The only thing I can be certain of is that I exist. I can't even look and grab the tangibility of another person's mind. That I'm taking this very skeptical approach that I think is deserved. That when we use the term objective truth, wow, those two words combined are quite powerful. In a deep philosophical sense, I think what objective truth that is evoking is a very grand idea. And I think by the very nature of subjectivity as humans and the assumptions we have to make, I don't think it's a good thing to say that we have reached objective truth. I think that all we have reached are refined abstractions. You can never escape the abstraction of your reality. You can never gaze upon the objective substrate. And that'll be all for my closing.
I wanted to say you have 2 minutes left if you don't want to use it.
I'm willing to cede my 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to clear this, and then Sworne can start her 5 minutes when she's ready.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Tundra. So I think I'm gathering your premises, and I think you're saying that reality is constructed in the mind, which is a proof of subjective truth. And your second premise might be something to the effect that understanding is co-subjective and refined. What I would like to say about objective truth is that both of those point to the objectivity of truth. And I'd like to start with the first one. Reality is constructed in the mind. If reality is constructed in the mind, then it has to come from somewhere. Reality isn't being it's being processed within. But the only reason why it's being processed within the subject is because the subject is acting in time, space, and matter. And because the free agent is acting in time, space, and matter, then they're processing what their environment is. And what their environment is constant enough to give way to your second point that there is co-subjective understanding. Without a consistency in reality, there would be no co-subjective understanding. So reality, by even your own premises, must by necessity be objective, or else you do not have any sort of definition or contrasting element to substantiate your position. Even the definition of subject, well, where does that start and when does that end? It must by it in order for something to have a definition, it has to have a contrary. There is the subject, and then there is the all. There's the individual, and then there's the all-encompassing. So there has to be differentiation, and if there's differentiation, then there must by necessity be constancy. And if there's constancy, and constancy is present in a place where there's also differentiation, then there must be sophistication. And if there's sophistication, then there must be explanation. And that explanation can, and I concede to your subjective claim, perception pattern, sort of recognizing machines that we are, we have to recognize in order to interact with reality. And I'm absolutely. But that reality is not dependent upon our interaction of it. It's like it's almost like a video game. We're sort of just like downloaded or we're characters in this preset world. And this world is, and I'm not going to bring God into it, but there are set standards which cannot be overcome by the subject, meaning no matter how much you think gravity is not a problem, it doesn't mean you can go jump off a cliff, because the objective reality that we act in is a greater will. It's the third witness and the greater witness than the subject. And if you go and you jump off a cliff, even though you think I can fly, I can fly, I can fly, you will still fall. And so I think you've made a fair argument. I don't think that you've been able to prove subjectivity or subjective truth being what reality is. Nonetheless, I do appreciate your participation, and I thank you for your time.
1 minute left.
And I close.
Okay, so that seems to be the done with you guys debating each other. So now we're going to go to open discussion questions with people that are in the audience. And I also have a poll to see who the audience thinks was the more logically compelling speaker. I will paste that now.
I'd also like to take a quick second to thank Sworne. This was a great discussion. I quite enjoyed it, and I like the cordialness through which we approached it.
Yeah, it was legit.
This was a really good job, everybody. Proud of you. First time moderating, too. I learned a lot.
Yeah, good job, Battlefield.
So let me see if there's anything in the chat that, if you guys want them to specifically answer you, try to @ them so that we know who you're wanting to respond to your chat. So if you chat and you put their name in there, then I'll have them try to respond to your statement. And this will be around 15 minutes of us just having this time to interact with the people watching.
Cool.
Oh yeah, it doesn't allow VPN. Should I make it where I can allow VPNs? Is that a problem for people? Okay, let me see here. Well, no one else is having that complaint. So, I mean,
Okay, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question though. So is a subjective truth believer closer or farther away from level 8 thinking according to the levels chart by HM?
I would say that 6 and up introduces this notion of subjectivity. And I would say the higher you go, you are dealing with more complicated subjectivity that you've refined.
We have 3 votes. But it looks like my dude has his own voting system here with 2 votes in there. I'm not going to vote because, for obvious reasons. So I'm just going to do something else as my vote.
May I ask you to clarify more what you mean by third witness?
Yeah, sure. So the third witness is essentially the fact that is present when 2 are pondering. And so if 2 subjects are discussing a matter, the third witness is going to be the object of that discussion. And so if you say, well, I have 2 pickles, how many do you have? And I say, well, I have 2 pickles, how many do you have? Well, the third witness is going to say you both have 4 pickles.
I think we got our first question.
Let me see, @ Tundra. So it says, this is from Sandstrider. How do you justify participation in the exterior without a concrete belief in the exterior? In other words, do you act as if there is a reliable external reality with logical consistency? And how does this behavior interact with your belief?
It's a good question. So I basically I operate in the real world with 2 opposed beliefs that I kind of it's fine that these things oppose each other. So I kind of pre getting lost in the philosophical sauce of consciousness and subjectivity, I still hold this belief that yes, reality is real, that I'm interacting with this reality, and I treat everyday life as such. However, with this refined understanding of the nature of consciousness, this reality perception barrier, the fact that we can't even touch the tangibility of other minds, I would say that I act in accordance with this kind of objectiveness, but at the same time, I realize this subjective prison that is inescapable. And this can kind of warp your sense of reality. When you realize that your reality is entirely constructed within the mind due to sensory perceptions, you kind of realize that there is so much that you will not gaze upon. And this is why I bring up this substrate that there is no way to step outside of the prison of your mind and gaze upon the substrate. But I act as if the abstraction I'm dealing with is indeed the normal reality.
So I'm going to say what Cryptic said because she added Tundra. So Cryptic said, "You don't know that at Tundra." What's
Can
your
you be
response,
more
Tundra?
specific, Cryptic, about which part?
Yeah, can you articulate it more clearly so he can respond to you? She says, "People go on trips all the time, but you can't go outside your own head."
Hmm.
I'm just reading what she's saying.
That you cannot go outside your own head. I would argue against that. I think the very nature of consciousness. Oh, it was just a joke.
Uh-oh, she's backing down. Okay.
I don't think she's backing down. I think it was just a joke.
Okay. She's joking.
Do we have any other questions? Otherwise, if Sworne's up for it, I'd like to discuss a little bit more.
So yeah, you guys have 9 minutes left, so you guys can just keep riffing, and if people want to at you, we can just interrupt whenever someone has something they want to add. But this is
Yeah,
more of the
sure.
this is more of the people's time.
Also, like, could we have people, like, if they wanted to come on to voice chat, like, raise their hand and then we could add them? Can we
Yeah.
do that?
I mean, I don't know how to do that, but we can go for it if anyone wants to.
Cool. So that's an option too.
Yeah.
Do you have a question, Tundra, or
So I would like to hear you explain your worldview more.
my
Do you want to,
worldview? So, like,
or
outside of the constraints of the debate?
well, not the constraints of the debates. Well, this notion of objectivity. What is So you asked me, where does my subjective reality end? I would like
Mhm.
to ask you, what are your bounds? Where do you think your subjective reality ends? Where do you think objective reality begins? What is this interplay? And
Yeah, that's
I'll,
a good question. Um, I I think I tried to answer this earlier, but I'll just kind of restate what I said. I do believe in subjective claims which concern personal preference, like this almond is the best tasting almond in the world, or my favorite cookie is red velvet. But that subjective claim is being weighed against the preference of the subject, meaning the ideal, the good, if you will, of the subject. So there is a good and a bad in the subject that we each have our subjective operations made within, right? So we can choose to eat the cookie or we can choose to kick the kitten. And within us is a system that says, well, this is good and this is bad. There is a system that is outside of us, which says this action is good and this action is bad. And that system that is outside of us is superior to our subjective decision making. So if I say this almond is the best tasting almond in the world, well, I haven't tried, this tree down in Sri Lanka that may be creating like the actual most like biologically delicious almonds according to how they interact with the taste buds on the tongue. So there's a difference between the subjective preference and the objective truth.
So, Sandstrata coming in here with another thing for Sworne. He says, how does your recognition of the imperfect individual interact with your belief in external truth? How do you decide what to question and what to believe with firmness? Where does faith enter into this equation?
So we did talk about not bringing God into the debate, and if we're still using the constraints of the debate, then I'll leave him out. But if not, I can answer this.
Maybe we'll just do everything except for the last part. Just the...
I'm willing to let her bring her faith into it if it's not a contention of argument.
He already took out faith, so he just removed that part. So I'll ask it again without the religious part. So it says, how does your recognition of the imperfect individual interact with your belief in an external truth? How do you decide what to question and what to believe with firmness?
How do I decide what to question?
And what to believe with firmness?
Well, I decide and I believe are both subjective statements. And my decision is also a subjective choice. I base those choices off of the objective reality and my relationship to it. So if the objective truth is that if I kick a kitten, it will hurt the kitten, and my subjective truth is that I love kittens, this is a subjective claim, then my action is going to reflect the objective reality. But sometimes sometimes my subjective claim will not match up with objective reality. Like, let's say objective reality says that 2 + 2 is 4. And I subjectively say, well, what if 2 + 2 is actually 5? Because I'm in conflict with what is objectively true, I'm in error. So the subject is necessarily less than what is objectively true, which is outside of the subject, which is what I've called in this debate the third witness. I don't know if I answered it.
Sandstrider, did that satisfy your question? I'll go next to Odolev. He says, at Tundra, is the correspondence between the subjective realities of people as demonstrated by the success of science at explaining the world just a profound coincidence? If not, then what's the underlying in this correspondence? What's underlying this correspondence?
That is a great question that really strikes at the heart of this topic.
I'll read it again while you think about it. So, because
I think I can approach it.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So, is the correspondence between subjective realities a profound coincidence? I would say that no, it is not a profound coincidence, and I think that's okay. My main contention here is that while it is not a profound coincidence, that I would label these truths subjective. Now, this really heavily depends on how we define objective. I would say, like I said earlier, that all we are doing is refining our subjective realities against each other. We are refining an abstraction of objective truth. We are refining it so much so that we colloquially refer to it as objective. But I say that this is a false use of the word. I would say that how we approach this in a normal day-to-day sense is fine. When we say this is like the objective truth, or we say this is objective, I think that's all well and good. My understanding of trying to think deeper of what does objective mean, what does truth mean? When we combine these two words together, what does this mean in a philosophical sense? And I think it's really hard to pin this down. There's the variance of definitions.
Well, he wants to know what the underlying this correspondence as his if not statement. And then I'll let you respond to that a little bit, and then I'll get to Cryptic's statements.
Sure. So what's underlying this? I think a good assumption is this objective reality. And I'm not contesting that objective reality and objective truth theoretically exists. My main contention is that we have no ability to interact with it. That reality, the subjectiveness of consciousness, is merely an abstraction. So I would say that, sure, it is a reasonable assumption to make that it exists outside of us, and there is most likely an objective truth underlying it, but we cannot escape our subjective prisons.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Cryptic next. She says, if you say 2 plus 2 is 4, but everyone else says it's 5, how do you know it's 4 at Sworne? She says, non-math experts may be more helpful in this instance. How do you know if you really saw a boy drop the ball if no one else saw the boy drop the ball, but everyone was watching the boy and you saw him drop the ball?
Yeah, okay. So I think that's a two-part question, and I'll start with addressing the first. The way that I would know that the group was wrong is by experiencing reality myself. And so, regardless of the co-subjectivity, which is a reality shared amongst a group, like cults are a really good example of this. People leave cults because they recognize that reality is not what it is being proposed to be in the cult. There is error in groups, regardless of how large. Reality is superior and larger. So, yeah, I guess my answer to that is just like being able to experience objective reality, and then as a free agent making a decision to either follow or disfollow the group. And then to your second question, it's sort of like,
Okay, first I want to remind everybody.
I've asked this question before, and I think I might have asked Tundra, but it's, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? And the objective answer to that riddle is yes, it does make a sound. The subjective answer to that is no, because sound would have to be dependent upon the receptibility of the subject, and sound being a wave would have to be received by a hearer. So it's a fun riddle.
So we have run out of time, but I will finish going through the questions we have, but I'll not be accepting any new questions after right now. All right, so let's do the last people that have typed stuff. So Odolev says, at Sworne addendum, what if you were hallucinating the boy dropping the ball? How'd you tell the difference? That's for Sworne.
Shoot. How would I, if I was hallucinating? If I was hallucinating, how could I tell? I think I would have to have a sound mind in order to be able to differentiate, because there's people that have bipolar, or not bipolar, but schizophrenia, who are unable to tell the difference between a hallucination and reality. So let's assume that I have a sound mind, even though, yeah, let's just assume that. So I would be able to differentiate between the hallucination and reality if I had a sound mind. And if I didn't, then the third witness would be able to differentiate between the ball dropping and not.
Okay, so next we have another one for Sworne from Cryptic saying, but language is the product of shared reality. 5 could mean 4 if collectively we say 5 means 4. No?
Yeah, so this is actually a really good point too, because it gets into definitions and where do definitions come from. This implies creation. And so just because we call 4 5 doesn't create suddenly a fifth digit, right? creation is independent of the observer.
Okay. So it looks like Johnny Boy was intending this for somebody. I think they intended it for Tundra. They said, when someone with a motorcycle dies, the motorcycle still exists. The love for that motorcycle may be gone, though.
He's talking about the statement above. Well, what's the point then? If you can define them a way where you're correct and you could define them in a way you're incorrect.
Oh, right,
because,
right.
Yes, because I talked about these words and their deeper meaning. I do not want to shy away from this. I think that is a valid thing to levy at me. I don't want to act as if I'm trying to define myself to win. So I will elaborate on this. I think that there are two ways to define objective. We can define it as, this independent existing of the mind. And in that sense, you could say, I'm just trying to define a win. So then I think I showed with the perception reality barrier the inherent subjectivity of that. If this other way of defining objective, talking about this invariance between minds, I think that is a really good claim for objective truth. However, I believe that I showed through scientific paradigm shifts by talking about the subjective building blocks of reality and truth, that even if we define objective as this invariance between minds, there is still a lot of doubt to be cast on its certainty.
So it looks like I have here Sandstrutter has another thing for Tundra. It says, in human interaction, shared values and experiences are what build connectivity and trust. Do you recognize that a lack of belief in an objective truth introduces a vast divide, an unbridgeable disconnect between individuals that is harmful to human connection and cooperation? Given that you behave as if objective truth exists in daily life, is the reason because acting on the opposite belief would be paralyzing or detrimental to you?
I'd like to approach the second part of that question first. I behave as if objective reality exists. I do not behave as if objective truth exists. I think that, yes, this is a huge, unbreachable divide of the subjective nature of human interaction and how we each perceive the world through our psychological constructs within the mind. I think that this is, you could say it's somewhat harmful, but it is what separates our views. I think no one would deny that we all view the world a different way, and that is what causes tension between people. I would like to reiterate that I do believe that an objective reality exists, or I act as it. And yes, I have to act that way because it would be paralyzing or detrimental. If I get if I act in the framework of only my subjective reality exists because I cannot verify anything beyond it, you can come to some very deranged conclusions, and it would warp your sense of reality. So I act as if objective reality exists. I do not act as if objective truth exists.
Okay, let me see here. Let me see. Cryptic Biscuit kept a reply to Sworne before the cutoff point that says, that's some of what I was getting at. How do you know you're hallucinating when you perceive something as objective truth? Isn't the third witness the collective? Everyone else looking saying there's no ball drop, and that's for Sworne.
No, so the third witness is just that. So you have the subject, which is witness number one. You have the second witness, which would be co-subjectivity, which is what you're talking about, which is shared reality. And then you have the third witness, which is the greatest of the three and constant in its sophistication. So if I can't tell if witness number one subject is delusional, right? Because I'm hallucinating. So delusional, I'm believing a lie. By that very definition, already you're involving the third witness, because it would imply that there is a reality and there is a disreality. And me experiencing a disreality and then it being confirmed that it is a disreality by the second witness, co-subjectivity, only strengthens the witness to the third witness who qualifies, yes, indeed, you're hallucinating.
So it seems that that concludes. It says, can you tag your original post Battlefield? Okay, so I'm going to stop recording because we have completed our scheduling.